if I was an elected official and coming to you saying, what state should I look at for a good example of emergency response, kind of county level hauler agreements and oil pipeline siting and maybe spill liability? Are there some good states that you would point to for good examples, best practices?
I should say that I haven't done a comprehensive review of all states' laws in this area, so I hesitate to say this is the best state, but certainly Washington State has a very good emergency response plan in place, law in place, and I know Montana, Minnesota, and I believe Arizona have siting laws in place that allow the states to have impact on where pipelines are routed. And I'm going to be continuing to work on this issue to come up with some even better answers to that question. But certainly, it's an area where there need to be states need to have the ability to exercise the powers that they possess.
And maybe I should introduce myself because I'm asking a friendly question of the press. I'm Mark Treshock with Dakota Resource Council in North Dakota. So we were involved in this in the Public Service Commission's case to under which they gave this permit for the route. But I wondered if Bob and Paul would want to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened before those proceedings were finished, when there was no eminent domain. Because my impression from talking to people is that there were a number of people who were approached for an easement, who were told that if they didn't sign this, that eminent domain would be used against them, even though the Public Service Commission had not yet formalized the route and had not yet granted eminent domain. I also understand that there probably were some political subdivisions, counties and townships perhaps, that were asked by the company essentially to endorse or to come out in favor of the pipeline before these proceedings were finished. Can you give me examples of that, and maybe talk about what the impact of that is for the people on the front lines of all of this, which are people like you who own the land and live on it?
Well, I'll take the first part about the condemnation. That word came up very, very early on. I mean, maybe they didn't, but I remember it was the first person that showed up that was just getting permission for them to go out there and do their surveying and stuff. And I just said, well, what happens if I don't let you, or we decide that we don't want that on our land? And like I said, that was the very first meeting, and it just said, well, then you go to condemnation and stuff.
What does that mean? Sorry. For them to put you in condemnation, what exactly does that mean?
It gives the court is given the authority to let them have access to your property.
I got a question there. And if they do, if the state of give the agreement to condemn land, eminent domain, then they take the liability, right?
Silence in the room.
Very good question.
I mean, you granted him to go over your land, so if he has a leak on it and there's expenses, he goes back to the state, right?
What do you think, Bob and Paul? Are you gonna,
Our
is that gonna
easement,
happen in your case?
our easement contract says that TransCanada will pay for all the reclamation and cleanup costs.
Now, that ain't what I'm saying.
Okay.
Say that your water's polluted for 100 years. They gonna pay you for 100 years, or is the state gonna pay you for 100 years?
I think we're speculating. We don't know.
Because this liability deal, the reason I'm asking this is because if that went into the Ogallala Aquifer, not only is that in the state of Nebraska, that's in the state of Kansas, in the state of Oklahoma, in the state of Texas. And Wichita, Kansas gets their water from Ogallala Aquifer.
One of the questions that some of the landowners have been raising is that, and they hear different stories, right? Because the land agents tell them different things, you know, using their words, not mine, to try to pit them against each other, essentially. You know, your neighbor signed, so therefore you should, when sometimes that wasn't even true. But they're saying that the land agent is telling them that they have to take out their own liability insurance. So $1 million, $2 million liability insurance policies. Did you guys run into that?
I asked my insurance carrier that exact same question, and it took a month to get a response. So it was, and they said it would appear that you're fined. In other words, they weren't gonna charge me more insurance because I had
An oil pipeline coming through.
and so now, you know, I'm hopefully my insurance company understands what risk that they believe that they were gonna be put under.
Is the pipeline in your area underground and has it crossed any large rivers?
In North Dakota, we wouldn't call them large rivers, but it crosses the Cheyenne, which is probably the most delicate river, which eventually leads to the secondary resource of Fargo municipal water. And that did draw quite a bit of attention, and going back to Mark's question about did municipalities have to, part of the agreement with the city of Fargo was city of Fargo had to commend and sign on that the pipeline was a good pipeline. Again, I wasn't part of the negotiations, I'm not sure why that wording was inserted.
Mr. Swift, I try to establish from time to time whether organizations such as yours, in this case, are against this route, or are you against any pipeline coming from that area into the United States?
Well, excuse me. There are layers upon layers. We certainly believe that this pipeline isn't in the U.S. interest, and we believe it is true. We believe that U.S. energy independence doesn't lie with expansion of the tar sands, but through efficiency measures and new technologies. So the NRDC is opposed to that pipeline and pipelines that would expand the tar sands region. But that being said, we think it's there are many parts about this project or elements of this project that are independently bad ideas, and certainly something that makes this idea a lot worse is routing it through the U.S.'s largest groundwater aquifer. And so I think that if we, that in itself, if we had no problem with the tar sands region, I think we would still have a problem with that route.
Are there any other questions?
I'd like to, due to the aquifer, I've done some research on the aquifer in a sense. Nebraska averages 2.5 million cattle in the feedlots. It's in the feedlots today, and they take 12.75 million gallons of water per day to water those cattle. It's in feedlots. Then I called 3 counties, Cherry, Holt, and Custer County. They have 303,000 cows and calves on them 3 counties that get their water out of the Ogallala Aquifer. The ethanol plants, and which we have quite a few in Nebraska, which make clean fuel, takes 1 million gallons of water per day. And they also pay $100,000 a month, roughly. And we have a number of meat packing plants in Nebraska. And I am told that they use between 2.5 and 3 million gallons of water per shift. And if this water in the Ogallala Aquifer, besides the cities and the towns, and I checked with the hospital the other day, they didn't know how much water, but since this is a pipeline deal, if that water in the Ogallala Aquifer gets ruined, how big of pipelines are we gonna need to fill these gaps?
Yeah, I mean, it's certain that that's a critical source of water for Nebraska and the United States, and that our water resources here are so, they're so important that they need to be protected, and decisions like the one that's being made now needs to be given full due diligence and not, rushed ahead with. So, certainly it's a huge issue.
And I got a letter the other day from a friend in Texas. Well, actually, it's a family member, I guess. And they said it's so dry down there that they have a little spring, they said, in one of their pastures, so they're down to 8 head of cows and 1 horse. They've sold off all the other ones. And last fall, they could buy a bale of hay for $85, and now it's $135 a bale to try to keep a little livestock on. So if we ruined our aquifer, and what I said, our cattle business in Nebraska would be, or not only cattle, it's livestock and everything else, all our wildlife and everything else.
Paul and I joked on the way down here, we wish that we could send some of our water down that pipe to Texas. We
Yeah.
certainly have enough to get rid of.